Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. I am live. I'm going to go pop out to the little boys' room and I'll be right back. Thanks everybody for joining me. All right, guys, we are live. I'm just going to head over to the super chat so I can keep track of what you guys are talking about. Give me 1 second. Just a sec. Thanks for bearing with my unprofessionality in regards to the way I run this channel. I appreciate your patience. All right. So, what's on everybody's mind today? What's going on? Just saw news that Tulsi Gabbard made the 100, I believe it's 130,000 unique donors to make it into the third debates. So that's good. I definitely want to see her included in the future debates. I actually thought her sparring with Kamala Harris was pretty impressive in the last debate. And one of my reactions to that was just my amusement of seeing Kamala Harris get so upset. I mean, I haven't seen her with that disdainful of a look on her face ever. And one of the best parts of that whole exchange was every response to Tulsi Gabbard. She refused to actually look at her. If you notice, she just only looks at the panelists as she's responding to what Tulsi Gabbard is saying. That's kind of unusual. Usually a lot of these candidates are not afraid to look at each other and look in their direction as they're responding, but she refused to look in her direction, and just the look on her face was almost like incredulity. Like it was almost like she was thinking, who the fuck does this bitch think she is talking to me this way? I mean, that's honestly was the look on her face during that interchange. So that was a highlight of the debate for me. I mean, as far as any real substantive foreign policy talk, it was almost non-existent. It seemed like they just fired off questions about Afghanistan towards the end that didn't really amount to much. They spent so much more of the debate talking about immigration, and most of it was just platitudes. I mean, honestly, it seemed like the least substantial debate I have ever seen. That's how little substance there was in it. And maybe that's just because I'm becoming more cynical over time, and I just have less and less tolerance for this kind of bullshit, but it just seemed completely empty to me. The previous night's debate, I guess, was a little more substantive because you had Bernie Sanders answering a lot of questions about healthcare, But other than that, that also was a vacuous, empty mess. There was just nothing in either debate, honestly, for me that really resonated. And what's also weird is with all the hatred and the animosity that the Democrats appear to have towards Trump, Trump barely got mentioned in the debates. And it just doesn't, the urgency just does not seem there at all to me. Um, it wasn't too long ago where a lot of Democrats were talking about Trump as if he was the new Hitler, as if he was a Russian Manchurian candidate. Um, Almost nothing about Russia really, even in these debates either, which I find interesting. That's kind of uh, an illustration of how nonsensical the Mueller report was and how it really amounted to nothing. Um, even talk of impeachment was kind of skint. Um, so I see some people are coming into the chat now. Hi Tony, hi Sandra, hi Manny. Uh, I'm not going to read off the other usernames in the chat just because I don't know how to pronounce them. Um, Somebody says good evening from the UK. Thank you. Hi. So I guess today I didn't really have a plan for this stream really at all. So um, if anybody had a chance to listen to my bonus episode of Media Roots Radio where I go through all my favorite political films, chime in if you can. I would like to even get some suggestions from you guys for films that you think I may have missed in that list. I listed out about maybe 50 different films that I thought had politics that mirror my own worldview and have a really strong political message to them. But I realized in doing so that it sort of revealed how shallow some of my film knowledge goes. And I was definitely called out by a few people, understandably, about that. So that was interesting. David said he loved the film review. Thanks, David. So I guess let me throw it to you, David. What did you think I may have missed on that list? Was there anything you were surprised that I actually didn't include on any of those lists in regards to political films? Andrew says he's looking at my drone poster in the background, and he wants the candidates to discuss their views or plans about implementation of drones domestically. David says Oliver Stone's talk radio. Someone was it also you, David, who mentioned on Twitter that was one you thought of it should have included. Someone either it was you or someone else mentioned that too, and actually that is a very good. That would have been a very good pick, and I'm not sure what category would have gone. That would have gone in, maybe sort of commentaries on American society, perhaps, in that list. Oh yeah, it was also you. Excuse me. So I actually think that's a really good film, and it's sort of it definitely captures a certain era of like the AM radio, talk radio era, when some of the most extreme views you could hear on the left or the right. I mean, actually, mostly, almost all of it was on the right. But some of the most extreme views you could hear in this country in any broadcast form was over AM radio, or actually even over shortwave radio. But the movie Talk Radio was about AM talk radio. Of course, that's where like Rush Limbaugh got his start, Michael Savage. But shortwave radio was also sort of a prominent format for really radical radio programs for a while. That's actually where Bill Cooper comes from. He was on shortwave, and some of his broadcasts are like 6 hours long, with profanity laced rants. I mean, it's pretty interesting how shortwave is still, as far as I understand it, it's not censored by the FCC in the same way that AM radio is. I mean, there's definitely FCC regulations about like what bandwidths and things you're allowed to broadcast on, but it's definitely seems more free for all. And I'm going off on a totally random tangent, but this whole broadcast is going to be random, so I guess it doesn't matter. But if you're curious about shortwave radio, there are still some like political programs being broadcast on them. Most of the political programs that I know of are sort of from Christian leaning militia kind of patriot groups. They're sort of more old school conspiracy patriot group, kind of militia right wing people. But actually, a lot of that stuff is still better and more interesting and more authentic, in my opinion, than a lot of the conspiracy stuff in the Trump era. Which, if you are a follower of mine, you know that that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is how the conspiracy movement seems to have been consolidated and shored up so that now all the narratives are extremely lockstep, and you could basically read the same clickbaity conspiracy narratives off of several websites, like going from Zero Hedge to InfoWars. They all seem to be putting out essentially the same narratives about Trump, deflecting heat away from him. Even though they're not necessarily pushing the QAnon conspiracy, they are more or less pushing the same narrative that QAnon pushes about how Trump is an anti-deep state hero who's here to save us and all this stuff. So I actually do appreciate sort of the older school, even though I'm very left-wing, some of that pre-Trump era, you know, even pre-Obama era, it was definitely even stronger because Alex Jones had like a Pied Piper effect, and he brought a lot of these other smaller entities along to his side. But there's a whole interesting rabbit hole and story just involving Bill Cooper and Alex Jones, which if you haven't heard of any of that stuff or haven't heard of any of that drama, definitely look into that, because Bill Cooper is sort of considered like the real deal militia anti-government guy before Alex Jones, who actually called out Alex Jones as being a potential controlled opposition government plant. Like in 1999, I believe, he called him out. Even in 2000, so he would continue to call out Alex Jones as being a plant or some kind of asset for a while. And then he died in a firefight, I believe, with either a sheriff or federal agents who came to arrest him after an arrest warrant for not paying his taxes. So let me see what the commenters are saying right now. Peter Durant asked if I included 3 Days of the Condor. I meant to, Peter. I was actually going to be in my honorable mentions for my top, I think I made top 15 or top 10 political thrillers. 3 Days of the Condor, Marathon Man, and Parallax Views was on there as an honorable mention, but I actually forgot to read off the honorable mentions for that section. But it was definitely on there. I think 3 Days of the Condor is a pretty excellent film. David Wint says Talk Radio was also based on a real life situation with a DJ in Denver, Alan Berg. I'm only very vaguely familiar with that whole situation with Alan Berg, David. Feel free to tell us a little bit more about that story, or even provide a link about what happened to him. I know that Talk Radio is based on a play that's actually still running on and off on Broadway right now, and they always pick like a relatively famous actor who's been in film to play the stage role. That I forget his name. The actor who plays the whoever's supposed to be Alan Berg or representing him in the movie, it's played by an actor who's I don't know his name, but he's in. I want to say he's in Boogie Nights. No, he's not in Boogie Nights. He's in that other movie about the porn industry. Anyways, Talk Radio is a great movie. It's definitely one of Oliver Stone's best movies, I think. And yeah, I probably should have included in that list. So, kind of regret not doing that. Henceforth says RIP 90s Coast to Coast AM. I mean, honestly, Coast to Coast AM, as wacky as it was, and as insane as some of the guests were that would come on, definitely one of the last great radio shows on radio. It's very sad that it's gone. Um, and I used to listen to it constantly. Art Bell is one of the the last great radio DJs on the radio, and that's how I will remember him. Great radio voice too. Sort of one of those old school radio voices that you can only get from chain smoking. Joe Smith's asked, did you have The East with Britt Marling on your list? No, I actually didn't. I've never heard of that film. Give us a little bit more information about it, Joe, and why you think it should have belonged on that list. Uh, Jay Graves asks, have you watched Spinning Boris? No, I haven't. I also never heard of that film. Give us a little overview of what it's about and why you think it should have appeared on that list. L Thompson BU says, have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yet? Yes, I have. I'm sad to say I was very disappointed by it. I went in not really having many expectations for it. Like, I knew it was going to be kind of a meandering movie that didn't really necessarily have like a core narrative or a plot. And even going into that with my expectations that low, I still found it very uneven, I guess is the main thing. I loved parts of it, and there were other parts where I really cringed. Um, so yeah, I won't spoil anything. Um, but I think that I actually like Django and Inglorious Bastards better. Although as far as his new films, his newer films, like I guess the last 4 or 5, I'd say out of those 5, my favorite one by far was Hateful Eight, which I know is not a popular opinion to have, but for some reason that movie really did it for me. I loved the way that it was all filmed in a very small set, the extreme sort of widescreen lenses that he was using. It felt almost the most like a play of what Quentin Tarantino has written so far. Um, and in a way, it actually reminded me quite a bit of Reservoir Dogs. Definitely not as good as Reservoir Dogs, but it had some stronger aspects that sort of his more mature filmmaking style has now that I don't think Reservoir Dogs could have pulled off. I mean, just the sets, the setting, the snow, um, that stuff was beautifully done, I thought. Was it violent? I don't know if I can answer that without spoiling it. So just not going to answer that question. But if you're expecting it to be violent, like other Quentin Tarantino movies, I'd say you probably won't be disappointed. But it's not going to be. He definitely throws some curveballs into the mix, and that's sort of, I feel like, obviously an intentional choice by him. But um, it's actually, in a weird way, it's one of the most un-Tarantino movies I've seen. Um, if that makes any sense. Peter Durant says, we could pick up Bernie Ward's KGO show here in LA from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. every weeknight. Loved his show, and because my insomnia, would listen to Ray Taliaferro from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. I'm there with you, brother. KGO, their lefties, like during the Bush era especially, was like honestly some of the only, especially Ray Taliaferro and Bernie Ward, was some of the only left wing AM radio talk stuff that I could find that was actually like really anti-Bush. And I loved listening to both those guys. I eventually became even more far left than the both of them, especially during the Obama era. And it was very, very, very sad what happened to that station, honestly. Not just with Bernie Ward, but I don't know, Peter, how long you were a KGO listener, but Carell, uh, Pete Wilson, Bernie Ward, Carell, and Pete Wilson. Even though I didn't like Pete Wilson's politics, 3 of their strongest hosts, arguably, within the same year, all succumbed to different life tragedies, I guess you could say. Bernie Ward was caught up in a sting operation where he got arrested for possession of child pornography. That was a brutal time. And coincidentally, Bernie Ward actually taught at seminary school. He was Kavanaugh's teacher I think he went to seminary school, I want to say, or some kind of religious school. He was actually Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court appointee's teacher in school. This guy Bernie Ward ended up being charged for child pornography. Ray Taliaferro, great politics. I think he's still alive, actually. Oh, you know what? I hate to say this. I think he actually was found either dead or with such severe dementia he was like declared missing. I don't really know the whole story there, but he is actually not okay. I take that back. But what happened to Carell, the other lefty hosted KGO, for anybody who doesn't remember this, Peter, maybe you remember this, is it was during the time where Joe the plumber was like a subject of discussion in the news. I guess that moment where Joe the plumber approached Obama while he was doing some kind of walkabout. But it was really funny. Carell was just so sick of hearing about Joe the plumber in the news cycle that during a commercial break, and at that point he had started broadcasting the show from his own house. So during a commercial break, he forgot to mute himself, and he heard a KGO news update like come onto the radio during the break about Joe the plumber. And you hear Carell from across the room, live on the radio, going, "Goddamn motherfucking Joe the plumber. I want that motherfucker dead." and then stop. And that came live on the radio. He literally made he was just like so upset. He wasn't seriously wanting to kill Joe the plumber. He was just like so fed up with how much bullshit about Joe the plumber was coming on the radio. I mean, it's probably something I would have said. I probably would have said I wanted the fucker dead too, because he was such a boring asshole who just constantly being bombarded at us on the news. But yeah, Carell got his job taken away for saying that he wanted to kill Joe the plumber live on the radio. And then Pete Wilson of the same year, he's sort of the centrist political host. He died from anesthesia going into a very common knee surgery. So that was a tragic year for KGO. And I'll always remember how weird that was. All that, like, three of the strongest, most popular hosts from this radio show all sort of met their own demise in different ways within the same year. Let's see. Let me go up to the chat here. See what else everybody's talking about. Stephen Rudden, yeah, I listened to the Kev Baker show. Stranahan distancing himself from Trump alt-right and opening up a new front to control truthers who never fell for Trump. Yeah, I had mixed feelings about that, Stephen. I mean, I think that it seems to imply that Lee Stranahan might be waking up to the disinfo operation that he was attached to the hip to for the past 2 years. We have to remember that Lee Stranahan also still actively promotes PNAC neocon Frank Gaffney. As recently as 2019, he's kind of a Gaffneyite, you might say. He believes wholeheartedly all of Frank Gaffney's neocon conspiracies about the Muslim Brotherhood, which sort of extend into the Awan brothers and Huma Abedin, and that she has no clitoris. All these crazy, it goes into like immediately like a weird psychosexual conspiracy about how Huma Abedin is like a cuck queen or something, and she lets Anthony Weiner do stuff while she fucks Hillary Clinton. It's a whole convoluted, weird psychosexual mess conspiracy theory that the right wing has devised about that. But basically, back to my point, was Stranahan has some of his own serious problems still. He's able to identify that Cernovich and Jack Posobiec and the people who bankroll them, and he's also able to identify that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA are all part of a disinfo operation to shore up Trump's base and to keep it intact. But it's strange, actually, that he's not looking into his own dirty house. His house isn't clean. He makes videos all the time with Cassandra Fairbanks of the Gateway Pundit, who I would argue was at the epicenter of launching Pizzagate with her pal, Eric Prince of Blackwater, who also was instrumental in launching Pizzagate. Lee Stranahan seems to believe only a certain select few of these right-wing disinfo operators were responsible for Pizzagate. Well, let me tell you something, Lee. Your friend Cassandra Fairbanks, as far as I know, was the first person to release the spirit cooking story. And her friend, Eric Prince, she gives softball interviews to him on the Gateway Pundit. This is all part of the same disinfo operation. This is all a limited hangout operation to take energy from not just the conspiracy culture, but also the anti-war movement, and sort of mix it together and combine it into this weird mess that's compatible with this bullshit QAnon narrative that Trump is a hero, that John Bolton is a hero, that Rudy Giuliani is a hero. All this bullshit. But Lee Stranahan, I feel like he's on his way to fully waking up. For some reason, he still thinks Alex Jones is good. I have no idea how he could be that fucking dumb to still think that. Maybe maybe the Band-Aid's not fully ripped off from him. I don't know. I know people who have been talking to him and trying to sort of lead him to a better place mentally with some of this stuff, and it seems to be working actually so far, that he's waking up. But again, he's a Breitbart protege, so I don't really know how awake Lee Stranahan's going to get, but it actually is a good sign to see someone as influential as Lee Stranahan on the right calling out liars like Cernovich and Jack Posobiec, and linking it together with an Alan Dershowitz sort of network as well. That's something that Cernovich has tried to erase, and he actually blocked me on Twitter finally when I was just bombarding him with proof that he was friends with Alan Dershowitz. So anybody out there trying to say that Cernovich is some kind of hero in this Epstein scandal and that he unsealed the documents, you are literally falling for a limited hangout disinfo op put out by Alan Dershowitz and Mike Cernovich. That's what's happening, because Alan Dershowitz is also heavily involved with Epstein. Not just his lawyer, but was also alleged to have raped teenagers with Jeffrey Epstein. But yeah, no, I'm really interested to see where Lee Stranahan is going to go from there. If he's already calling out those people, then I would hope eventually he'll start seeing, oh my God, these people I was hanging out with last week are also part of the same operation. I don't know though, if he's gonna wake up that fully, but I hope he does. And honestly, I'll just say full disclosure, Fault Lines, his program, invited me to come on their show about 2 months ago to talk about Venezuela. I didn't want to be rude about it. I just told them I couldn't make it at the time. But if I'm to be completely honest, the reason I did not want to appear on his program was because of his associations with Frank Gaffney and his buddying up to PNAC neocon Frank Gaffney. I mean, so if I went on his show, that's kind of, I would have to mention that. I would just be like, hey, Lee, just for the record, I want you to know I really strongly disagree with you buddying up to a PNAC neocon. I don't think you should do that. And I think it discredits you and your show. I've pretty much been my intro to his goddamn show. So I don't like being rude like that to people. So I guess giving the brush off is also rude. But in this case, I just declined the invite because I would have had to call him out for that. But let's see what some other people are saying here. Henceforth, the new Tarantino being like American Graffiti. Actually, that's a kind of a good comparison. It does have sort of the same level of indulgence nostalgia of that era, for sure. So if you like that aspect of American Graffiti, you will probably love this movie, because it's a lot of pretty wallpaper and aesthetics that are very like period piece, really hard worked on in ways that Tarantino has really never expressed in his previous films. At least in my opinion, that he hasn't. I mean, even in Inglourious Basterds, as much as I appreciated it, it didn't feel to me like he really went above and beyond with setting it during World War II with the period piece aesthetics, the way things were interior decorated and inside the sets. Was not convinced. I wasn't fully convinced that I was actually back during that time period. There were some great aspects of it, but it just never grabbed me in the same way that, this movie's setting definitely feels fully lived in, fully realistic. So did Hateful Eight. Did not feel that with Inglourious Basterds. Did not really feel that with Django Unchained either. I feel like there were just some weird anachronisms. Even the way Django was dressed, it just, to me, some of the clothing and stuff just felt too modern. It didn't click with me in that way. Um, it felt almost kind of like a surreal representation of the past or something. Spinning Boris. Jay Grabe says Spinning Boris. It's about American consultants helping to revive Boris Yeltsin's failing re-election campaign in the 90s. It makes all the hysteria of alleged Russian meddling pretty laughable. That sounds really fascinating. I'm assuming this is not a documentary, right? This is like a fictional movie with actors and stuff. Um, David Wint says he likes the Day the Earth Stood Still remake. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that it was a good allegory for the climate crisis. I just think that making it about the climate crisis during a period that was so soon after 9/11 is a total fucking cop out, if I'm being honest. I mean, here we are living in another era, hyper militarized era where everyone is just gung ho to go kill everybody in the Middle East. To me, it's a no brainer to do another anti-war film out of a Day the Earth Stood Still remake. So I was extremely disappointed with it. I would not recommend it to anyone. Although it has some decent special effects. I mean, it's not a bad movie in and of itself. It's just, to me, it just doesn't make sense why they would have pulled away all the anti-war stuff um, from such a strong anti-war film. I mean, one of the strongest ever made, arguably. Um, L. Thompson BU says, I like the Irishman trailer, fan of Scorsese gangster movies. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I do generally like his gangster movies, but I don't know if Scorsese can capture the lightning in the bottle from sort of his early gangster movie eras, like Casino and Goodfellas. Um, I feel like anytime he has attempted to channel that since then, whether it be The Departed, even Wolf of Wall Street tried to channel that. I do not feel that it works. It feels kind of, it just doesn't work for me. So I don't have very high hopes for The Irishman, if I'm being honest. Um, I would say Scorsese's best work of the last 15 years is probably The Aviator. And I personally haven't seen any of his movies that even come close to that movie for me personally. I think The Aviator is easily above and beyond any of his films from the last 15 years. David Wint says, I hear you, but are you aware of what's happening in the Arctic right now, Greenland, Siberia? A little bit. I mean, I'm not following it very closely. Yeah, I mean, the climate crisis is real. We are really, really fucked in that regard. I still think to turn The Day the Earth Stood Still into a movie about the climate crisis is a bastardization, and it's really doing a disservice to the original movie. So even though the message in there might be good, I still think it would have been a stronger, more memorable remake if it was a straight down the middle anti-war film, just like the first one was. Oh, it's starring Jeff Goldblum. That sounds kind of interesting. Oh, straight to Showtime movie. Okay. Um, there's definitely some good political movies that have gone straight to Showtime and HBO, and I kind of skipped over some of them in my list. What was the other movie you mentioned? Let me go scroll back up. The East is about a group of eco anarchists who seek revenge on a company for polluting a river. Britt Marling is an undercover agent who infiltrates the group and ends up sympathizing with them. That sounds very, very familiar, but I can't. Oh man, I feel like I have seen that. Um, but I'll have to look it up again. It sounds very, very familiar to me. And I remember it being pretty good, but I'd have to look it up again. Um, I don't even know who Britt Marling is. Like the name doesn't ring a bell. As far as TV shows on right now, let's get into some. Let's just talk. I guess let's just talk about some other TV shows and movies since um, there's really, to be honest, I'm a little burnt out on talking about serious shit right this moment. Um, rather keep it a little light. But if anyone has any questions about anything serious going on, obviously, feel free to say them in the chat. Klitsch says, "Cool Mario Wizard, thanks." I don't know if you could see behind me. I have a few other things right under the drone poster right there. Some other Mario plush toys. See if you can make out what those are. That's not all I have. If you saw all the toys I had, you guys would think I was nuts. Um, I'm not even going to really say what I have in here. Faint Signals from Vega asks, where can you buy your music, Robbie? Probably the best place to buy my music is on my own Bandcamp page. Let me see. Let me pull up the URL to make sure I'm not getting this right. fluorescent-gray.bandcamp.com. That's the best place to get my music right now. On if you just want digital copies of it. Yeah, I've actually checked out a few of these Sam Harris podcasts with like technology predictions and sort of futurist discussions, and I wish that I could stomach him. I just can't. It's something about him. He just seems like a robot to me. I don't find him very interesting. I just don't find him very entertaining to listen to. I mean, there's people on like the far right to me that have more charisma than I can actually stomach and listen to sometimes just to check out what they're saying. But something about Sam Harris just is it's I just can't handle it. Like I can even handle like Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, and some of these other joker grifters in the intellectual dark web even more. But yeah, it's just Sam Harris is just I don't know. I can't put into words why I hate him so much. Um, I mean, I can even listen to the Weinstein Bros, Eric and Brett Weinstein. And especially Brett, I feel like is especially grueling to listen to. His weird, flat affect. It's just weird how many of these like intellectual powerhouse people. I don't mean this in any way to disparage legitimately autistic people, but they just seem somewhere on the spectrum where they just don't relate to like normal people very well, and that it comes across to me very strongly when they talk. So like I can't. It's weird. Like it just feels a little Aspergery. Like I can't click with what they're saying a lot of the times, or their emotional displays feel very flat, robotic. I guess is the best way to describe it. Um, that's a good comment, David. I like that. Um, I don't remember The Wanderers, the film. Stephen Rudden says that's my favorite movie growing up in the 80s. It sounds really familiar, but I can't remember. Give me a example, or just like tell me what it's about. Try to jog my memory. When Trash Talk goes wrong, he's saying that two of Trump's sons were at the Colby Covington fight at UFC. Uh, Not surprising, um, but I don't know. I mean, UFC is kind of one of the most popular sports in the country now, so I'm not too surprised to hear that. Yeah, I don't know what. I mean, maybe they are just there for the fun of it. It's possible. Maybe they want the cred from all the UFC people. You know, because do any Democratic politicians actually go to these fights? They're trying to maybe gain some kind of blue collar, gym bro cred. I don't know. Get the Joe Rogan vote. I honestly don't know. Um, it's interesting though. Oh yeah, his interaction with Chomsky was embarrassing. Very, very embarrassing. I mean, I honestly thought that would be like the end of his intellectual career after that argument was published, but nope, not at all. Joe Smith says, "Hey Abby, I've been trying, or hey Robbie, I've been trying to help Abby out by correcting her Wikipedia page, but it's hard keeping up with the haters who edit it." Um, yeah, Joe. I mean, there's definitely one editor in particular, and you might actually already be familiar with him if you've already had discussions. He's a veteran Wikipedia editor. He's done over like 5,000 edits, or probably even more than that. And on the top of his own Wikipedia editing page, it's not Philip Cross. Good guess though. But it's someone else who says like their number three hobby on Wikipedia editing is to like make sure that Abby's, I don't know if I don't remember what he said, to make sure like Abby's 9/11 stuff or something about her not being like an objective journalist is like always at the top of the page. And he's like proud of that. So like a veteran Wikipedia editor's like number three hobby or goal of his Wikipedia editing career is to go and fuck up Abby's page, and he openly talks about that on his own page. So, Joe, I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but I just found that very interesting. That it really just takes one very dedicated person, seemingly without a day job, without a life, who spends hours and hours a day on Wikipedia to manipulate someone's page. Faint signals from Vega. So, how does one address that? Good question. From what I understand, people who have their Wikipedia pages maliciously manipulated or edited will actually hire PR agencies to slyly get random people to edit the page back to normal or to keep watch over it. That's actually against the Wikipedia rules to like hire someone to edit for you or whatever. But there has to be people doing that on a regular basis. It just doesn't make sense. And you're not supposed to edit your own page either. They don't like it when you do that, but obviously, like look up any like low tier actor who has barely a career in Hollywood and tell me that they did not hire their own agency or they did not edit that page themselves. It's absolutely clear that some of these like very low ranking actors who have Wikipedia pages just hired an agency to make that page. Um, but I've had my own page deleted twice for non notability. Um, Abby's had her page heavily manipulated. She actually had her page deleted several times when she still had an RT show. And even the fact that she had a show breaking the set, it wasn't enough to gain notability, according to some psychotic, like obvious neocon fucktard Wikipedia editors who just didn't like her politics. So that's really what it comes down to. I think the wiki editor's name is Snoogans. That doesn't sound familiar to me, Joe, but it could be. That might have been the same page I was seeing. L. Thompson BU. You know, it's funny you mention that Chapo and our podcast are your favorites. They have never talked to us. We have tried talking to them. I specifically have tried talking to them multiple times. Never gotten a response. Never been invited on the podcast. Abby's never been invited. I've never been invited. But interestingly, they were our top listener. The Chapo account on SoundCloud was our top listener about a year and a half ago, for about 2 weeks straight. So I took a screenshot of it, kind of just keep, holding that close to my chest, like, hey, invite us on your podcast if you're our top listener. And actually, some Chapo's fans thought that was like kind of rude of me, and I looked petty for doing that, so I kind of stopped. But at the same time, it is sort of bizarre that Chapo official SoundCloud account was listening so much to Media Roots Radio and they've refused to interact with us or invite us on their podcasts. It's a little disappointing, but this is actually quite typical in not just the political scene, but in the music scene. Bigger podcasts, bigger musicians will, you know, listen to or pay attention to smaller musicians for inspiration, maybe even steal some things, pull some ideas, and then not credit the people that they're listening to or checking out. So that's, I mean, kind of business as usual. I'm used to that. So yeah, it would be cool if Chapo gave us some kind of shout out or anything, but no, never happened. Um, and also, some of the people on Chapo. Oh, is it actually going staccato? Is it okay? The audio? Um, yeah, the Chapo Reddit sometimes mentions our podcast. But at the same time, I have a feeling that they would never invite someone like Abby and I on, because Chapo is one of those left podcasts that does shit on people, any form of anybody who has questioned the 9/11 attacks. Any shade of 9/11 truther is something that they have actually made fun of and mocked before. So I have a feeling sort of it's like Abby and I have been canceled in a sense, not for saying hate speech or anything like that, but we've been canceled in the left scene, in a sect of the left scene for quite a while, because of our outspoken views about 9/11. It's quite a shame that so many people on the left with established platforms think that it's insane to say that Bush completely lied about the 9/11 attacks, but here we are. That's 19 years after the event, or almost 20 years after the event. It is still taboo on the left to talk about 9/11 as if we were lied to about it. So it's very sad, but that's the reality of the situation. And I'm totally projecting. I have no idea. That's just an assumption I'm making. But I know that probably that has cut Abby and I out of appearing on some bigger platforms for sure. Um, Faint Signals from Vegas says you and Abby would be great as a live stream. You can make it a super chat and bring in some income. It would have to be from the Media Roots channel, Faint Signals from Vega, because I have been stripped completely 100% of monetization abilities on my own YouTube channel. The reason YouTube said copyright infringement. Even though I have never tried to monetize any of my videos with copyrighted clips or anything like that, all of my stuff does fall under fair use. But they have determined that I have gotten too many copyright strikes that now I can no longer monetize anything on my channel. So if you would like to support me monetarily in any way, don't bother with YouTube. And I probably would have also discouraged you from doing it before, because I think YouTube is a bullshit company that's actually censoring free speech and censoring controversial thought from the internet. Um, but yeah, if you want to support me, you can do so on patreon.com/Robbie Martin. You could also support our podcast, Media Roots Radio, at patreon.com/Media Roots Radio. And Joe, we really do want to do that. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while. I'm thinking for our 10th anniversary of Media Roots Radio, we're going to try doing our first attempt at a professional live stream with me and Abby together. I really want to do that. I think that would be fantastic. I think it'd be fucking awesome to take questions from you guys and make it really interactive. Maybe even take calls. I would really like to do that. Hey, Joanne. Good to hear from you. Yes, everything is well. Well, not perfect, but I can't complain. Life is good, relatively good. Hope you're doing well. I've been listening to Around the Empire occasionally. Keep up the good work. Kind of curious what happened to Daniel. I haven't heard from him or seen him online for a while, and I'm sure he's doing fine. I just was wondering. I was actually going to check in with you and see how he's been and if you guys are still working together on stuff. Faint Signals from Vegas says he already supports Media Roots Radio and Empire Files. Good man. Thank you so much for doing that. Faint Signals from Vega. How does the Gray Zone support itself, Robbie? I don't know how they could support the journalists just from Patreon. I don't think that they do. I think that they actually do take donor. They have donors, some donors supporting them. I would assume they do. Because, yeah, if just from Patreon, I don't think they'd be able to do that. I think that Aaron Mate maybe did a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe for his new video show that they're producing. I do know that. Okay, will do, Joanne. I would like to catch up with you for sure. We haven't talked in a while. Joe asked, do Abby and I live in the same city? No. She lives in Southern California. I live in Northern California. San Francisco is the closest major city to where I am. It's about a 7-hour drive to LA. Do I know why Gavin McInnes fell out with Vice? You know, that's a great question. When Trash Talk Goes Wrong asked that just now, you know, I don't think anybody really knows because both sides signed a pretty heavy non-disclosure agreement, and he got a giant payout when he left Vice. So anytime anyone's tried to ask this question in a deep way, at least Gavin has said he can't talk about it. So the people who are still at Vice, Shane Smith and co., they just pretend Gavin just doesn't even exist. Like, that's their way of dealing with it. Why he fell out with Vice, if I were to guess, it might have even had something to do with their turn towards being a tool of the Obama administration. I know he fell out in 2006 is when he left. So it was 2 years before the Obama era, but it's possible that Vice was, I can't say. I think it would just be pure speculation, and I'm going to sound like an idiot trying to come up with invent a reason for that. Faint Signals from Vago. I think Peter Lavelle is fucking horrible. If you want my honest opinion. Here's the thing you'll learn about me. Sometimes if you catch me on the right day, I will be very honest about the way I feel about people, even very obscure people in this scene. But he is a total fucking hack. He really is one of... a lot of people at RT are honest, authentic operators. Peter Lavelle is a straight up Putin worshipping shill. And I never call anyone a Putin worshiper or anything like that. But he really does fall into that category where it doesn't matter. It's like all he does is apologize for Russian politics. The most exciting moment in his life is when he personally got to interview Putin. I think that his show Crosstalk is mostly extremely terrible. The fact that they even have people like Lionel on there, like H.A. Goodman on there, is horrifying. I mean, just two straight up grifters. One of them is a QAnon grifter. It's really, really bad that they include those people in their talk. And if I didn't know any better, I would honestly think someone was deliberately trying to poison pill all the information coming out on Crosstalk to make people coming up with similar topics look dumb or crazy. Some of the shows on RT do fit into that weird mold for me, almost as if someone is like, let's associate stupidity with these subjects and associate an idiot like H.A. Goodman with a good subject so that people won't want to touch this good subject. That's my feeling on Crosstalk. I think it's actually probably it was always one of the worst shows on RT. And I really stayed away from it personally. I think almost all the other political shows, In the Now, Redacted Tonight, even sort of the weaker shows that replaced Abby's, like Watching the Hawks, all those are better shows, even though Watching the Hawks, let's be honest, is a total ripoff of Breaking the Set. And it's just kind of funny that they would even call it that. But yeah, I mean, no, Peter Lavelle, I threw him in the bin a long time ago. I really think he's terrible. Yeah, and especially his Islamophobic rhetoric. I mean, as soon as anybody gets Islamophobic, I'm out, man. I'm out. That's one of my main things. That's why also I have had really big problems with Tulsi Gabbard, because some of her rhetoric hints at Islamophobia. And anytime anybody hints at Islamophobia or anti-Arab bigotry, I'm out. I'm fucking out. Doesn't matter how good your other parts of your platform are. That to me is that's a fucking deal breaker. It really is. Um, what are my thoughts on Mike Rupert? I think that he's mostly awesome. Uh, I Even though my personal interactions with him are very depressing, and he was very rude to me. He was really friendly to my sister, but he was really rude to me, and the only times I interact with him made me very sad. But I still thought his work was great. I always really respected his 9/11 book, Crossing the Rubicon. I thought that it was fantastic. And in the end, I feel like Crossing the Rubicon might be one of the more accurate, um, sort of overall overarching theories about what happened on 9/11. Yes, Andrew, I do remember that short documentary they produced, about Mike Rupert at the end of his life, and I thought some aspects of it were not very respectful. And I remember wondering why Mike Rupert had agreed to do it and was so praising of the Vice documentary series at the time. But and I don't know what was going on with him, but I know that towards the end of his life he was very depressed. He was kind of going off the rails a little bit, and I didn't understand why he had agreed to do that documentary series and why he was praising it and promoting it so much. I was always a little confused by that. Even though I guess it was mostly respectful, I found it to be still trying to sensationalize who he was. Um, yeah, Abby, was communicating a lot with Mike Rupert in the end. Um, yeah, that was very personal for her. Uh, I mean, that's a very sad day. I mean, it's actually it's really sad how many people that we've communicated with since we've started doing this work who have passed on. I mean, great people. William Blum is another one, um, that we were privileged enough to be able to speak to. Barry Crimmins is another person that passed on, 2 years ago. One of the most, hardcore left wing political stand up comedians, in the country. Um, Gone. It's sad. Peter Durant asks, "Do I think antiwar.com will survive without Justin Raimondo?" Yeah, I do think it will, actually. And sadly, Peter, I think it might even be stronger without him. Even though I miss him very much, I think he did some great work. I do not feel that he was taking at least his own writings in a great direction towards the end of his life. I do feel that his Trump apologism and his acceptance of hardcore neocon psychopaths like Ann Coulter putting out anti-war platitudes, him taking that so seriously was a mistake. Justin Raimondo actually called me a commie for suggesting that Trump hiring John Bolton was bad. So that was one of my last interactions with Justin Raimondo. Um, he also did shit on 9/11 truthers who thought the U.S. government had something to do with it, because he thought Israel did it. So I think that's a little bit weird, but I think there's a lot of great writers that are still part of anti-war, and they will continue doing good work. And I'm not going to judge Justin Raimondo's career and his legacy based on the last couple of years of his writings or his tweets, especially. So I'm probably going to wrap this pretty soon. I know this is a little just random. Um, Stephen Rudden says, what's my opinion? I'm not sure if that was autocorrect. Asking me about Jeremy Corbyn being Labour leader in the UK. I mean, I think Corbyn's great. He's a lot more left wing than Bernie Sanders is. So for being like a promoted, you know, mainstream enough politician, he's better than almost anyone in the United States. I mean, arguably he's better than anyone in the United States. Jay Graves asks, "Have you heard when Gaza Fights for Freedom will be released online?" I haven't. It was supposed to be already released, but Abby decided to add a whole new section onto it. So I guess the release date's been extended. I'm sure when she has a solid release date, she'll announce it. J-Doll Music, how do you tackle folks like Barrett Brown who backs Marcy Wheeler, Russiagate theories, and dabbles in Assad apologist spreads? Also entities like Black Socialist, both who otherwise seem to have solid work. I would like you to maybe to restate. It's a little bit confusing. I'm not sure if your question... I'm not exactly sure what your question is. I don't know I don't even know what, I'm not familiar with the Black Socialist. I don't know if that's a website. I'm not familiar with that work. And I didn't know Barrett Brown. I mean, from what I see, Barrett Brown is not an Assad apologist. I think he's actually kind of taking the opposite point of view. I have no idea. So if you can restate that question, I'll try to answer it before I go. Faint Signals from Vega says, "Can I ask you something? If and when Trump wins, do you think it's going to go full-on fascist in that 4 years?" I think he's going to win. Not that the Dems are not equally problematic. Yeah, I think he's going to win too. Do I think he will go full-on fascist in the 4 years? I have a weird feeling, and this is something actually I've talked to Joanne, who was just in the chat earlier about before, that I believe that we could be facing something really, really dark here, where if another sort of false flag attack or major attack happens domestically in this country like 9/11, there might be forces in this country who want Trump to become the new Hitler. And we haven't seen what Trump is like during an active domestic terrorist attack or war President Trump, like with an Iraq-style war. That's when we'll go to real fascism. That's what it's going to take for us to go to real fascism. I don't think Trump on his own could just ratchet up the rhetoric to get there. There needs to be something else. But I think it's the perfect storm with someone like him in office to go full fascism, piggybacking on an event like that. Either a full-blown war or a domestic attack of some kind, like 9/11. So absolutely. Absolutely. Joe Smith, do you have an email we can contact you at and send you info or articles? Yeah, you can contact me at videohoax@hotmail.com for now. So I'll answer this one last question from L Thompson BU. Do you think the news coverage of these shootings perpetuates them, the way they make it seem like some scoreboard or celebrity thing? I mean, yeah, definitely. It's similar to serial killers. I mean, people were arguing back in the 70s and 80s if serial killers were inspired by the fact that other serial killers got so much publicity. I think absolutely that plays a role. It absolutely does. Taking out a bunch of people gets you into the news. I think that it's definitely a motivation for some of these shooters, or it's mixed in with their already existing motivations for doing this. But Dandy says, what would full-on fascism look like to you? I would say checkpoints. Every police is militarized. carries automatic weapons, full tracking of everything you do, like basically like house arrest, except either I don't know how it would be exactly be tracked. Um, an erosion of the First Amendment. Um, there'd be so many other things, but I think before we get to full fascism, like top-down fascism, we will get to a strange brown shirt era first, where the militia culture in this country, sort of the gun-toting, patriotic, you know, American tradition, will turn on political enemies. It won't be a full-on civil war, but I do think it will be like a strategy of tension. A lot of people defending the government, volunteering to. I think that we're going to see sort of Minutemen style stuff. Um, Maybe within the year, within 3 years, it's going to expand. Well, I guess that's it for now. I'm going to sign off. Thank you guys so much for joining today on this totally random podcast with no plan. Um, if you would like to support more of these live streams in the future, if you'd like to see more of them, or if you have any requests of any live streams you'd like me to do, please consider becoming a Patreon donor of mine at patreon.com/Robbie Martin. And if you like our podcast, you can always just donate to that. Abby and I divide up the proceeds and contribute it back into the resources that we put into the podcast at patreon.com/Media Roots Radio. Thank you so much. Take care.